Welcome back to our next video, which is going to be all about cell organelles and different cell types. I am hopeful that most of this video is going to be a review. So hopefully when you are taking notes on this, you feel confident in the notes that you're taking because you've at least heard this once before, maybe in like 7th grade or maybe even earlier. So let's dive into our review of cell organelles. So our first organelle that we're going to talk about is the nucleus. And the nucleus is this big purple thing in the picture on the right. And basically the nucleus just contains our DNA, which is our genetic material. It's very important, it's sort of like the brain of our cell. The next organelle that we're going to talk about is the cell membrane, also called the plasma membrane. So even though I only wrote cell membrane, you might see it in pictures as the plasma membrane. And this is what goes around the outside of the entire cell, and it controls what comes in and goes out of the cell. Our third organelle is the mitochondria, which are these orange kind of bean-looking things. And I'm sure you've heard this before. I don't know why this is like the only thing people take away, but right, mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. But really, what I want you to know about that is that mitochondria turn food into energy through a process called cellular respiration. And we're going to learn all about cellular respiration, but the key here is that mitochondria turn food into energy. That's what I want you to write. And then our last one for this slide are ribosomes. And ribosomes are all of these little like red dots that you see. They're on this other organelle, which we'll talk about, but they are also floating in the rest of the cell. So ribosomes are everywhere, and their big thing is that they make proteins. So ribosomes make proteins. Okay, let's continue on with some of the maybe lesser known organelles, or maybe ones that you're maybe forgot throughout the years. Okay, so our first newer one, or maybe just more rare one, is the nucleolus. So the nucleolus is this dark purple dot within the nucleus. So it is found in the nucleus, and the nucleolus makes ribosomes. So it's like a production line. The nucleolus makes ribosomes, and then ribosomes make proteins. Our next organelle is the Golgi apparatus, which is this like really kind of fancy looking folded up pancake, purple, pink, I don't know, whatever color, organelle. And the Golgi's job is to package and send proteins out of the cell. So we've been talking about proteins a lot, so they are very important, but the Golgi's job is like a mailman, right? It packages up this information and it sends it out of the cell. And then our last two pieces are the rough and smooth version of an endoplasmic reticulum. So the rough endoplasmic reticulum is called the rough ER because it is covered in these ribosomes, which gives it like a bumpy feeling. So it is rough. It has ribosomes. And you can remember that because they both start with R. And this rough ER actually does go around the entire nucleus. And it transports substances like proteins within the cell. Our other endoplasmic reticulum is the smooth ER, and this is just a little bit further outside of the nucleus, and it does not have ribosomes on it. That's the key differentiation, is that the rough has the ribosomes and the smooth does not. Also, because the rough has a ribosome on it, you know that it's dealing with proteins. The smooth, which does not have ribosomes on it, does not deal with proteins, and instead, it transports lipids in the cell. So the rough one, the rough ER, transports proteins and has ribosomes on it, and the smooth ER transports lipids and does not have ribosomes on it. The three of these, the Golgi, the rough ER, and the smooth ER, they all sort of look like folded up membranes, and that's kind of because they are, but you will have to be able to differentiate them maybe in a picture or definitely by their function. So we will practice this, but I just wanted to show you the three of them in this image together. Our next set of organelles, we have the lysosome, which contains digestive enzymes that kind of just like break down waste and remove it. And the cytoskeleton, which is this like purple stuff going all the way around the cell. You can kind of see it throughout. And that is to maintain the shape of the cell and give extra support. The cytoplasm is like the background of the cell. It's everything in this cell that is not an organelle. It's a gel-like substance where organelles just sort of are suspended within it. And then our last piece is a vacuole, and that's like a big closet for cells. They store nutrients and waste and water. And these are our unique organelles. This is the last bit of organelles that we are going to be reviewing. Our first two belong in plant cells only. So we have the chloroplast, which uses the sun's energy to make food through photosynthesis and contains the pigment chlorophyll, and that's what makes it green. So chloroplast is only found in plant cells. And then we have the cell wall, which is on the outside of the cell membrane, so it's the outermost piece of a cell, and it gives extra support to plant cells. And then our last two are cilia and flagella, and they both help with movement, but cilia is this first one with all these like little tiny hairs that stick out around it, and flagella is the second picture with one tail-like whip that sort of just like quickly swishes back and forth to propel this cell forward. You could have more than one flagella, but you would never have as many flagella as you would have cilia around a cell. Now we have our last two bits of information with our cell types. So what makes plant and animal cells different? Plant cells have the 3 C's. They have chloroplast, they have a cell wall, and they have a central vacuole. Animal cells and plant cells both have vacuoles, but the difference here is that an animal cell is going to have really, really tiny and like lots of tiny vacuoles, whereas a plant cell will have a huge vacuole because plant cells need a ton of water storage, whereas animal cells, it's not quite as important as it is for plant cells. And then differentiating between prokaryotic and eukaryotic. So maybe you've heard these terms before, but a prokaryotic cell is like a bacterial cell, and a eukaryotic cell is like you, an animal cell or a plant cell. But you are eukaryotic. That's a great way to remember it. They sound the same. And these 5 bullet points are just sort of like what makes them super different from each other. So prokaryotic cells do not have a nucleus and do not have membrane-bound organelles. I mean that in organelles like mitochondria or lysosomes or anything like that. Prokaryotic cells are earlier in evolution, which makes them a little bit smaller and simpler, and they're unicellular. And basically, the opposite of all of those points make up a eukaryotic cell. So eukaryotic cells do have a nucleus, they do have membrane-bound organelles like mitochondria and lysosomes. They came later in evolution, which makes them larger and more complex. And some are unicellular, but mostly they're multicellular. And the last thing is, what do they have in common? So both prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells both have ribosomes. They both have the cell membrane or the plasma membrane. Remember that cell membrane can be called plasma membrane. And cytoplasm, that gel-like substance that is sort of just in the background of all cells. Okay, I know this was a long one. I hope that a lot of this was just review, but if it wasn't, then I would love to meet with you and chat with you about any questions you may have. But great job, and I will see you in class.